I'll shut up.
Good evening, everybody. Bonjour. I'm Sama Elibiari. It's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to this information webinar about the dangers of online pornography to girls and young women. First, I'd like to make a land acknowledgement. As Canadian and Quebec Muslim men and women, we stand in solidarity with all Indigenous community in a spirit of respect and collaboration. We pledge to commit ourselves to confronting historical and ongoing colonialism and injustices, because there can be no end to racism and ultimately reconciliation without addressing historical injustices. We honestly acknowledge the ancestral, treaty, and unceded territories of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, peoples that call the lands we live on home. We want justice for all people. At this moment, my heart is broken over what I watch taking place in Gaza. As you have seen in the poster, to stand for Palestine is to stand for humanity. Now let's look at the mission of CCMW, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. Here in Montreal, we have our own chapter. It's dedicated to the empowerment, and this is a key word, equality and equity of all Muslim women in Canada. The objective is to affirming the identities of Canadian Muslim women and promoting their lived experiences, community engagement, and public policy. We also want to advocate for their diverse needs and equipping local CCMW chapters with the necessary resources to maximize national efforts. Let's look at the history. In 1982, a group of dynamic and devout Muslim women from across the country congregated in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Led by the lead Dr. Leela Falham, these women sought to mobilize their passion for social justice and faith to enrich their communities and work towards the common good of Canadian society. This inaugural meeting led to the establishment of what is known now as CCMW, le Conseil canadien des femmes musulmanes. We're firmly committed to the vision of improving the status of women and empowering Muslim women to remain true to our Islamic heritage and Canadian identity. This webinar is taking place during Muslim Awareness Week that starts officially this Thursday. So for once, I'm ahead of my schedule. Every year from January 25 to January 31st, we commemorate Muslim Awareness Week. How did it start? When did it start? It started after the tragic events at the Centre culturel islamique du Québec, January 29, 2017. 6 men were killed, 1 paralyzed for life, and 18 orphans were left to mourn. So we thought of initiating this Muslim Awareness Week to be able to show to our society our contributions, our concerns, and our aspirations. Now I'm asked, what is the relation between Muslim Awareness Week and this information session? I think I will answer this question at the end of the session. It is my pleasure now to invite Senator Julie Miville-Deschênes to give us a brief overview of Bill S-210, officially called Protecting Young Persons from Exposure to Pornography Act.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I want to thank Sama Elibiari and the Canadian Council of Muslim Women for this excellent initiative. Talking openly about the harms of pornography on girls and teenagers is somewhat still a taboo in our society. but it is essential to shed light on what has become a public health issue and for some an epidemic. I will give you a bit of political context on my 3 years battle to advance Bill S210, a bill protecting minors from exposure to online porn. First, in a nutshell, what does this bill intend to do? It makes it a criminal offense for companies to show porn to kids. And to follow the law, organizations distributing pornography have to verify the age of every customer before letting them access their website. This is a private member's bill, so as a single senator, I defend relentlessly in Parliament, in the press, and wherever I spoke the need to protect children. For more than 15 years now, kids have had full access to free porn sites, watching millions of hardcore video that can be violent, degrading, traumatizing, where women are almost always submissive or in a position of inferiority. It is totally the opposite of all the progress our society has made towards equality between women and men. As a mother, as a feminist, I'm very worried. Most of my Senate colleagues supported the intent of the bill, but disagreed with the methods and said it would simply not work. So I faced many challenges. The pandemic slowed us down. My bill was almost killed in the Senate, but we finally got to a vote and won. We is my team of two and I. S210 was finally adopted by the Senate last April. In civil society, I could count on some very loyal allies, doctors, children's psychiatrists, and two great women who have been literally by my side, Penny Rankin from the National Council of Women and the Montreal Women Council. I'm sorry, I'll repeat that. Penny Rankin, who is here from the National Council of Women and the Montreal Women Council, and sex addiction therapist Jocelyn Monsma from Connecting to Protect. And I saw that Pierre Beauregard, who's also been since the beginning quite a good ally, is here tonight. In that battle, I had support coming from all over the political spectrum in Canada, but also strong opposition from sex workers, the influential porn industry, and libertarians opposed to all regulations on the internet. So to minimize attacks, I stayed focused on only one targeted goal, protecting the children. I have not fueled the debate on the kind of porn that internet platforms offer to adults. It is a very legitimate debate, but one that I do not engage in. My main argument: in the real world, we prevent children from accessing porn in movie theater, sex shops. Why would it be different on the web? I don't see why. 3 years ago, I was preaching in the desert, but the situation has radically changed. More studies are coming out. More have seen the damages of porn on kids and asked for change in more countries and American states have legislated to prevent minors to access online porn. Parents are asking for help. There is still a huge battle ahead. My bill is now in the House of Commons. Before Christmas, at second reading vote, Bill S210 had the unanimous support of all the opposition parties, but most Liberal MPs voted against it, and the government announced it was firmly opposed to this bill because of safety, security, and freedom expressions issue. Seriously, how can a short age verification of porn customers done by an accredited third party be a threat to freedom of expression? Also, there are ways to put in place strong privacy mechanism in the regulations following the adoption of the law. This is where we're at. I continue to speak out. It's a minority government, so Bill 210 could still pass if enough members of parliament and enough citizens make themselves heard. But it will be a hard battle. So I wish you a good discussion on this crucial issue. Thanks again for including me.
Thank you so much, Senator Miville Deschênes. I know you have to leave us at the moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will call now Penny Renken to take the floor. She is VP of Children and Youth at the National Council of Women of Canada. She is the past president of the Montreal Council of Women and VP of the Provincial Council. She founded Canadian for Action, an informal collective of NGOs and professionals from across Canada dedicated to raising awareness and advocating for legislation directed to protecting children from online abuse and exploitation. Penny is also an advisor for the Quebec-based Salvation Army initiative addressing care for victims of trafficking. Thank you so much, Penny, for being with us. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. I'm actually going to share my screen because I have a little presentation to guide us through everything. So just one second. Okay. I think if you make me small on your screen, you'll be able to see anything. So thank you, Sama, for the invitation opportunity to speak with you today. Um, it's a difficult subject, as Julie was saying, but one that we're taking on with a lot of commitment. So my talk will actually be broken down into 4 sections. So I'll provide an overview of what is the adult entertainment industry and carry forward with prioritizing protection, helping how Canada is in fact trying to or has been speaking about developing online safety bills, and then the actions that we can all take. Not moving forward. There we go. Okay, so overview of the adult entertainment platform. And the point here is that it's adult. It's meant to be directed towards adults. But this initiative and this focus is on protecting children. They call it the adult entertainment industry, but what we're talking about is the porn industry, really. ALO is a company that was founded, based here in Montreal. Well, not here in Montreal. I'm not actually in Montreal at the moment, but it's based in Montreal, and it refers to itself as an adult entertainment industry conglomerate. ALO itself purchased MindGeek, and a company that hosts and holds a number of different sites, including Pornhub. Interestingly enough, prior to being referred to as MindGeek, the company was called ManWin, and it was developed and started by 2 young Concordia University students. It's kind of sad that we have to have the Canadian flag there because, frankly, Canada is, and Montreal itself is considered really a hub when it comes to online porn. So in 2020, a New York Times article was published about a story about a young girl who was desperately trying to have her video of herself removed and from the Pornhub website. Her boyfriend had shared it, ex-boyfriend, obviously. And literally, when she realized that this is what had happened, literally tens of thousands of individuals, most likely men, had seen this. A coalition of advocates in response to this article came together, and you referenced the Canadians for Action. And in fact, Jocelyn, who spoke earlier, and some other the members who are participating today, all were part of that initiative. And what we were trying to do is ride the wave, finally, of some kind of activity around this issue. And what really spurred us was the fact that in this article, The Children of Pornhub, the subtitle said, "Why does Canada allow this company to profit off videos of exploitation and assault?" And in fact, that's exactly what they were doing. we got together and rather we took a backdoor kind of an approach in terms of advocacy. And what we decided to do was to attack the Visa and MasterCard, whose cards were associated with users, because there's certain parts of the sites, apparently, I don't go on them myself, where you could purchase things over and above what was free. A little aside, this is just before the pandemic hit, and when it was so critical, particularly in Italy in the early days, MindGeek and Pornhub, in their generosity, made all aspects of their site free to everybody in Italy. Not a brilliant idea. Anyway, we got together over 40 signatories, and the result was that the government promised new legislation to crack down on child pornography and hateful content. So that was a bit of a success. But here we are. Although these are 2019 figures, and they're taken from Pornhub's end of year report. So you're letting somebody in. It just gives you an indication of how large this issue is. Every minute on Pornhub that year, this was happening. There were over 77,000 searches. There were 387 videos being uploaded. It is extraordinary. And all it has done since then is basically grow one way or another. And please remember, Pornhub is just one site, and there are many, many others. So we're up against a huge, huge industry. One of the most startling figures, I think, that I came across in this research that I was doing that year, as things were coming to an end, is their proud declaration that if you had started watching their 2019's new videos in 1850, 24/7 hours a day, 7 days, weeks, 24 hours a day, you would still be watching them at the end of 2019. This is unbelievable. Another comment that says that if you copied all the data, the hard drives would reach over 100 kilometers high into the sky. So this is not something idle. Children's exposure to pornography that is accessed as online often is unintentional. A little child might even be using voice to ask for something like My Little Pony, which are those little animals up there in the corner. Now, historically, porn material was accessed through shops, behind cornered off areas like Blockbuster. We're all old enough to remember that, more than likely. But today, a child, it's just one click away. It is affordable. In fact, it's free in many cases. It's anonymous, generally speaking, and universally accessible. As I said, just one click away. And as Julie mentioned, it is increasingly hardcore. I won't get into too many specifics in terms of data on children and age and impact, but let's take note that it's underregulated, and like alcohol and tobacco, we cannot, moving forward, expect this industry to self-regulate. Sorry. Children as young as 7 are being exposed, as I said earlier, inadvertently perhaps, but we do know how it impacts their social, emotional, and cognitive development. And again, Jocelyn will handle this. And I think that as women, and women who are interested in protecting the rights of everyone, we recognize that this is engendering a kind of toxic masculinity, which can translate itself into violence against women as well. But we're moving now on to the next stage of what I wanted to say. So first block was to give you the idea of this is just so big. We're up against a huge problem. So what do we have? What can we use to help us? Well, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was adopted in the UN in 1989, which on the 20th of November, which happens to be now today celebrated as World Children's Day. They developed an approach to protecting children that really focused on their general well-being. But in 2021, there was a recognition, or there had been a recognition, and they worked towards this. They brought in an amendment called a general comment. And General Comment 25 was a bit of a shift, because not only did it defend children's rights in terms of their access to care, but it also looked at protection in the digital environment. And this was seen as a great game changer. So this was very, very important and has been some ammunition that Senator Julie Miville-Duchesne has been able to use, because not only does Comment 25 call for protection of children in the digital world, it specifically names and calls for robust age verification measures. So we have the UN behind us on this one. You'd think it was enough, wouldn't you? Now, I think a lot of Canadians are under the impression that we do a tremendous job in terms of our well-being of children. The committee that oversees compliance on the part of the UN in terms of countries who have signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the single largest convention in the world in terms of signatories, Canada, when it was compared with its peers, really, the top 38 countries, we rank 30th in terms of general well-being. And it really is quite striking when you realize that, and again, it's interesting that it came from the Senate, but in a Senate report in 2007, even back then, 17 years ago, it was recognized that Canada is not focusing on children. It's not focusing on their rights. And that particular report, and I do encourage people to look at it, Children, the Silenced Citizens, it really is looking at how Canada meets its obligations with respect to the rights of children. And we're about to launch ourselves into a situation where we're going to see how well Canada listens to the commitments and follows through on the commitments they've made to the convention, especially now that we have Comment 25. But just to give you some feedback, here's Oh Canada, No Canada. 20% of our children in Canada live in poverty. I don't want to get into all the details, but there is some real points here. 1 in 5 children has a mental health challenge. And I don't know how many, and perhaps Jocelyn will have something to say on this one, but this speaks to potentially, possibly some of the impact that exposure to porn has had on some children. At least one thing we do know, a child who is vulnerable, a child who lives in poverty, goes to school hungry, who's experienced discrimination, we know they are vulnerable. So we need action. So health, poverty, nutrition. These figures here are part of a report card that UNICEF put together back in 2015. But look there, we came 37th out of 38 in terms of safety features. This is shocking, and this is coming from a really, really respected organization, UNICEF Canada. We are not prioritizing the 8 million children who call Canada home, which is one of the reasons that as a member of the National Council of Women, we're deeply committed to the idea of having a children's commissioner, something that previous Senate report calls for as well. We need to have the government start focusing on what is happening to our children and not getting distracted. I'm going to do a very, very, very quick detour here, because what we're looking at with Bill S210 is really what children on one side of the screen are potentially experiencing. We want them not to see things on their screen. But some of the things that can be seen on the screen are happening to children. So today, there is a form of trafficking known as cybersex trafficking, where children are being abused online, and then that material is then uploaded as a video for those people who have, I guess you would say, an appetite for that kind of content, which is despicable. It's undeniably illegal, And even worse, it is being monetized left, right, and center. This is something new that we are, again, have to deal with. So, ending on that. So what really is happening in terms of Canada and the online safety? As I mentioned, back in 2020, the government said it was going to come out with methods and procedures and laws to protect everybody in terms of their experience online. And they narrowed it down to 5 types of harmful content. And those 5 were terrorist content, content that incites violence, hate speech, and non-consensual sharing of intimate images, and child sexual exploitation content. But they didn't really talk about protecting children. And I really question this packaging of children's issues along with other issues. Yes, we have to address terrorist content and inciting violence and hate speech. I don't think there's any argument there. But there will be plenty of arguments in a democracy such as ours around what constitutes hate speech, what constitutes freedom of speech. It's going to take time to work it through. So why, is my question, would the government include the rights issues around children and protecting them into the same bill? Of course, it's going to take longer to work through that process. They have had a process, they've had advisory groups, and they've had citizens' assemblies and roundtables and consultations. But this has been happening as we've also gone through a series of changes in terms of the Minister of Heritage, who is responsible for this, addressing these issues. So we started with Melanie Joly, and then went on to Pablo Rodriguez, Stephen Guilbeault, back to Pablo, and now it has just been passed this past fall to Saint-Onge. Notably, all 4 of those ministers are from Quebec. So where in the world are children safe? Because it's clear that Canada still hasn't produced an online safety bill. Lots of talk, but nothing's really happened. And we have this great opportunity to at least begin to address the issue with S210, and yet we're hitting roadblocks, as Julie made clear. But there are safer places. It's safer in the UK. They recently passed their online safety bill. France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Denmark. An EU resolution was also brought forward that calls for all nations as a part of the EU to look at how they're going to handle pornography in general. But the UK, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Denmark, and the United States that I've listed there have all adopted age verification. And there are many ways to approach age verification. And it's incredibly important not to conflate age verification with identity verification. Canada and Australia, you can see, are in italics, and that is because, yes, we're dealing with it, but we're coming up against consistently these questions about privacy. And privacy is important. We want to protect children's privacy as well, but age verification measures, as called for by the Convention on the Rights of the Child and as adopted by countries like the UK and France and now Spain, Italy, and others, there are many different ways to do it. The technology is not an expertise that I have, but if they can do it, certainly we can. The National Council of Women of Canada, who I am a part of as VP of Children and Youth, we put together a resolution that we brought to the International Council of Women in the summer of 2021, calling not only for age verification, but for all countries. We have over 71 countries around the world who are members of the International Council, of which we are part. And we're trying to help support those countries that aren't part of that other list, because this is a worldwide issue. This is a worldwide issue. So what are we going to do? Bill S210. Again, I underlined the S because it seems to me that when it comes to children, it's in the Senate that there has been an acknowledgement of the importance of those 8 million people who are Canadian citizens, but don't yet have the right to vote and don't necessarily pay taxes. So maybe that's the reason they're not being paid as much attention to. The bill, as Julie explained, has now been forwarded to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. And the website, which I think is now, I'm sure is now in your chat line, there it is again. There you can find a tremendous amount of information about the bill, and I encourage you to all look at it. It's really important that we send in briefs to the Standing Committee in support of this bill. It's important that we participate in petitions, and I'm about to tell you a little bit about one. There are letters to the editor. When you see this being commented on in the newspapers, send a letter. And not just a letter to the editor. Get in touch with it. Call up your MP. Let them know it is important to you. It's particularly important if you happen to live in a riding that is led by Liberals, because up until this point, at least, and I'm not trying to be partisan here, but up until this point, all the opposition parties are in agreement with moving forward on this. It doesn't guarantee that when it's returned from the committee that it will stay that way, which is why Julie is still very clear that we need to be diligent and carry on and not sort of get, oh, it's all going to be fine. It's not necessarily all going to be fine. So stay engaged, really, really important. And I really thank also the council today for inviting us and opening up this opportunity, because awareness raising is something that we really need to do. Below you can see some quotes that came from her webpage that's dedicated to the bill. And so that's from the Canadian Council for Child Protection, the International Center for Sexual Exploitation, and Patricia Leeson, who is actually now the past president of the National Council of Women of Canada. All of us are working together to see this through. So what are we doing? Well, the National Council of Women has prepared an open letter, and it is in full support of the act to restrict young persons' online access to sexually explicit material. I'm showing here two strips from our website now, and you can see in the upper section of your screen, open letter to support Bill S210. So if you go to our website, which is www.ncwcanada.com, you will be able to find that. I'll put it in the chat line afterwards. But there you will have an opportunity to click on the open letter to support Bill 210. And as I said, this currently is directed towards organizations and companies. We will be adding in another aspect to it in another week or two so that individuals can also sign. And what we are doing is directing this to the government, calling for support across, because parents alone cannot handle and take care of this. We need support at that level. So to end, what needs to be done? We need to continue with events like this, education and awareness raising. We need protection policy. We need to advocate for effective laws, policies, funding, because they will need funding. If we're going to have prosecution and that perpetrators are prosecuted, there needs to be directives from government to RCMP and police forces. We need to be diligent in making sure that anyone who doesn't comply with our laws, once they're put in place, that those are carried through. And I truly, truly appreciate the partnership between ourselves and the individuals who are participating today. This is difficult stuff. We need a sort of a language. We need a voice. We need a voice for the children. But it is a difficult conversation to have with people. So if anyone would care to get in touch with me at another time, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you about how you can address some of these things, whether you're talking to your children or your MP or the people in your community. And with that, I thank you. And
thank you so much, Penny. I think you answered most of the questions why do we have this event during Muslim Awareness Week? Because we're just citizens and we share the concerns of other citizens. We share the concerns of our society. So this is one of the reasons. And as you pointed out, it's a huge problem. It's a global problem. It's a problem that is taboo, in particular in our community. Parents don't know how to talk about sexuality, issues of gender, uh, all the issues that surround this topic. So I'm so happy we're having you as a resource person to shed some light on it. And now I'll give the floor to Dr. Jocelyn Selby. She worked in professional settings with police, courts, medical, and academic venues. She specializes in compulsive sexual behavior disorder. She also contributed to forensic evaluations related to child sexual exploitation material. She is chair of Connecting to Protect, a global initiative aimed at addressing the mental health consequences of children accessing online pornography. Dr. Selby is in clinical sexuality. She has a master's degree in clinical social work also. Thank you, Jocelyn. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sama. I'm just going to share my screen and share
I
sound.
see Shaheen is raising her hand. I don't. All right, so we.
Now I just have to move my bar. Why is it not from beginning? There we go. Well, Sama, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you today about this very challenging issue that probably many of you may or may not have heard of. The harms to children accessing pornography online are multidimensional across so many sectors: mental health, education, therapeutic strategies, and what we're really advocating for and what Penny has spent time on today is the legislation and regulation of this issue to protect children. And I'm going to talk to you today about the harms that come to children from accessing what we call pornography online. Now, I came to this space, as Sama mentioned. I work with individuals who have compulsive sexual behavior disorder. The majority of those individuals have all had early access, meaning childhood access to pornography. The older the individuals are, the more it is pictorial pornography. The younger the individuals are, it is online pornography. And the internet has created a portal for this information to be disseminated globally. So we're not alone in this in Canada, but we're certainly leaders in the porn industry. So we know that we have well over 7 million children in Canada. I think Penny mentioned it was around 8. When we first started advocating for this, for children to be protected, I think we're at about 4 million children in Canada. So the problem, children are continuing to be born in Canada and we still are not protecting them. And that's an important bit to know here today. We know that 1 in 3 children in the world currently have unrestricted 24/7 unfettered access to pornography online. And in most developed nations, we probably have more than 1 in 3 children that have access through digital devices to pornography online. Now, this next slide is a tiny bit of review, but pornography is printed or visual material containing the explicit description, or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate sexual excitement or arousal. Pornography is accessible by anyone on a digital device. It's affordable, it's anonymous, and I'm adding to Penny's slide, it's aggressive. So we know that pornography has a very aggressive side. It is demeaning and dehumanizing towards girls and women in particular. And so now this is a very interesting situation. I have a program that allows me to see who's getting the greatest hits on the internet. And what I know is that, you know, we can see Google is number one, YouTube number two. We all get that. Facebook number three, Instagram, Twitter. They're the top sites that get the most hits on the internet monthly and daily. These are from December 2023. The January 24 stats will not be out until the end of the month. But right now you can see that number 11, right after WhatsApp, is X videos. Number 12 is Amazon. Number 13 is Pornhub, which is the Montreal-based company. And TikTok is number 14, and number 15 is XX. So guess what, people? The porn industry globally is actually run by Canadians. It's not just Canadians out of Montreal. So the site that's number 11 and number 15 is also run by a Canadian. And so people have often said to me, why should Canadians be at the table to discuss this issue? And I say, well, because we actually run the industry globally. And most people find that shocking. If you ask people that question, they will say, for sure, it is not Canada, right? We're so under the radar. Now, why am I not moving forward here? There we go. So I'm going to discuss 5 harms to children from accessing pornography online. The first is that it ruptures brain architecture. What does that mean? Well, all of our children and all of us need to develop with a sturdy foundation developmentally from the earliest days of our lives. And what we know in a 2014 study that found that children who watch porn or individuals who watch porn, it actually physically shrinks a part of the brain associated with pleasure, leading viewers to require increasingly graphic material in order to become aroused. So we have a little glitch here, is that we're harming the initial architecture of our children's brains. Now, when a child is around 4 years old, the brain purges information that it doesn't need. When a child is 13 years old, around that age, the brain purges information again. We have no choice on what the brain purges or doesn't purge. And so, sorry, people, my video keeps shutting off. I don't know why. And I do have a touch screen, but I just don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, my apologies. So we don't know when a brain is going to purge or when it's not going to purge, but this is an important bit because a young child who starts to access pornography, and we have anecdotal research that shows children as young as 4 years old on a parent's iPad will actually click on pornography. And then what does that do? And as they have reasoning and judgment, which develops much later and starts to develop right after around 3 years old, just on average, we now know that a child can't make sense of that information, right? They can't make sense of it. And a 10-year-old is going to make more sense of it, but what's going to happen with watching the material? So these are all questions that we need to address. I do not know why this keeps freezing on me. So strange. Okay, Here we go. Sorry, guys. Okay. Pornography, I have to get rid of this bar because it is in the middle of my screen, causes vulnerabilities. It causes vulnerabilities for children to have body image issues, online predators, all of that. It really is a glitch. Now, as we discussed, how the brain develops and the vulnerability to online predators and body image issues are big. If you think that you always have to look like Barbie or whoever the porn stars are, and you have to behave like that, that does create some issues. The next issue is that pornography stimulates child-on-child sexual abuse. And this is where we have monkey see, monkey do. We have, I don't know if you have heard that saying, I don't know how to say it in French, and it means that we mimic what we see. So if children are watching this material, they will often experiment with other children. So exposure is very dangerous because it causes child sexual abuse. We also know that, whoops, somehow, sorry folks. We also know that this situation, I guess I have to use this cursor, that children accessing pornography, they're more likely to engage in risky sexual behaviors. We know that they are also, it can be, if they're watching pornography, it can be a starting point for young people when it comes to sex and how to have sex and what to expect. And we know that this is so interesting to me, that the Internet Watch Foundation found a 360% increase in self-generated sexual imagery of 7 to 10-year-olds from 2020 to 2022. That is dramatic. 7 to 10-year-olds people delivering self-generated sexual imagery on the internet. A 360% increase. And guess what? It was during COVID. So what were kids doing during COVID? They were isolated. They were at home. They were not, going out and mixing with friends. But we certainly know that they were online watching pornography. So a big issue that we need to address. So who's watching porn? The average age for children viewing porn is 12 years old. We know that by 11 years old, 27% have accessed porn. And by age 9, we know that 10% of them have. In December of 2022, the FBI issued a public safety alert about an explosion of financial sexual extortion schemes targeting children. The number of reports the U.S. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, received on this same harm increased by 7,200% again between COVID. And so if you think that the harms of COVID were benign, it is astronomical what we're finding. Now, the volume of CSEM, which is child sexual exploitation reports, has increased 87% since 2019. That stat is from We Protect's Global Alliance and from their global assessment in 2023. So CSEM is child sexual exploitation material. That is children, as Penny talked about, that are being sexually exploited on the internet. More than 90% of boys have seen online porn. More than 60% of girls have seen online porn. 84% of 14 to 18-year-old males and 57% of females have viewed pornography. Early exposure among teenagers to pornography, the stats all line up. It doesn't matter what site you go to, 93% of boys and 62% of girls. Whoops. 70 to 80% of men and 32 to 40% of women in developed nations watched pornography this last year. Now, I just have to say an interesting stat here. I brought up which sites were most accessed on the internet. And you saw that Pornhub was one of them, the Canadian-owned. Pornhub receives 140 million hits on average every month. Xvideos receives 240 million hits. Men and women are watching pornography. Children are also accessing it, so just don't kid yourself, right? 5 to 11% of all the billions of people on the planet globally watch pornography every day. 69% of American men and 40% of American women. I think that stat is actually low. 57% of young adults seek out pornography frequently. 29% of adults older than 25 seek out pornography, and approximately 30 to 40% of porn viewers who identified as having a compulsive sexual behavior disorder actually seek help about 15 to 20 years after they start accessing pornography. So what we saw in 2014 to 2020 was a plethora of individuals coming forward who had been accessing internet porn, because that's when it came on board in 2000. So I just want to talk briefly a tiny bit about the neuroscience. We know that the brain actually with young children and kids is even more dangerous because of how the chemical dopamine works, combined with the chemical oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And you get those two working together. So when you look at pornography, if you have a problem with pornography, you receive little electrical zaps of dopamine. That dopamine, then combined with oxytocin, is very, very dangerous for anybody, never mind young kids. So just wanted to touch on that. I could talk on that part for quite a while. So what happens here? Pornography actually hijacks our culture and our sexuality. And we can't get away from that, because what is being a normal part of the human condition and our wiring for survival and reproduction has now been replaced by something that completely hijacks our brains. So there's very sophisticated algorithms that all the porn industry uses. Some of it used to be called next generation affiliate tracking software. It's to keep you captivated. And unlike substance use disorders, which 10% of the population suffers from, we know that with pornography, in comparison, it's always about new and different information. With substance use disorders, it's about having more of the substance. With someone who suffers from a pornography addiction, it's new and different. And the industry provides that new and different by the sophisticated algorithms, the pop-ups that give you a plethora of menu items. And it takes away with what's going on here. Okay, so this is an interesting study. What happened? The intersection between human behavior and harmful sexual behavior. What you can see here in the middle is what I want to focus on. Acts of sexual violence as a result of children accessing pornography online. And this is recently just released from the Children's Commissioner in the UK. We've got coercion, humiliation, physical aggression, developmentally unusual sexual behavior, compulsive behavior. These are big issues: coercion, humiliation, and physical aggression. What are children seeing? They're practicing and they're mimicking that, and they think that that is how they should behave in real life. This is a result of the global summit that we conducted in 2022, where we had about 22 countries involved, 64 presenters, and we are publishing a white paper or a paper on that and the results of that. And this slide really depicts the findings from all of the presenters at this summit. So we have trauma and developmental issues, we've got compulsion, depression, other mental health issues, development of sexual dysfunction, grooming of children, grooming of partners, normalizing harmful behaviors. We've got parents who consume pornography. That contributes, there's research to show on this, it contributes to family breakdown. We have sexual aggression and violence, again, sexism and objectification, child sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, child-on-child, peer-on-peer sexual abuse, and the normalization of high-risk sexual behaviors with where individuals are engaging in sex with no protection, and sexually transmitted infections. These are all intersections of children accessing pornography online. We know that in order for children to be successful, that we need a strong foundation developmentally, and all of our society is built on the children of today. And so the failure to protect and promote the well-being of children is a tragedy. And it is very obvious that there are increased risks across a wide range of later life outcomes. This is from UNICEF in 2013, but you can also go to other studies that will show this as well. If you go to the ACEs study online that was done by Kaiser Permanente, you can see that individuals, as Penny mentioned, around the whole slide that she had around what are we focusing on in Canada around children and their safety on the internet. That was only one of the issues. Poverty, nutrition, all of those other issues were in that slide. And when you have those kinds of risks, the other issues that go along with it are really allowing a vulnerability here to children that is astronomical, and health issues that are related to that. So I have a slide here. I'd like to show you this brief video on a Canadian boy. This was a W5 documentary that was done several years ago, but it's to give you an idea of what the issues are. So here.
I was just playing on this game site, and all of a sudden this pop-up comes in the corner. You go and you click on it, and it's this porn site, and I'm like, whoa, that was weird. So I click on the X and I keep playing my game. For the few seconds that I saw it, I couldn't get it out of my head. You almost feel like a little craving, but at first you think it's curiosity, not a craving. Sometimes it would just be wanna see, click here. You know, you're like, well, what are you talking about? You click on it and then there's just this whole screen full of it. The addiction really all started in 3rd grade when I was 9 years old.
You can't help but feel responsible for the fact that, you allowed this in the house. The internet is just sitting there ready.
His entire pornography addiction happened in the kitchen and living room of my home while the family was in the room.
A lot of the times, you don't just pick one picture and then just stare at it. You just keep going and going and going, and all the pictures are always different. Type like 3 letters and there you go, you've got it.
I so wish that you put porn into Google and you came up with pictures of naked women. Bad enough as it is, it's looking like that.
People were thinking of the pornography that they remembered. The pornography that I found under my dad's bed when I was 10. Stacks of hay and gingham shirts and moustaches. Broadband internet became available to the masses for the first time. Suddenly, woof, there was an explosion of internet pornography. Overnight, at the click of a mouse, we were getting this extreme, body-punishing sex.
When we were kids, this would have been on the black market, not a click away.
In a society that is drug-infested, violence-racked, and polluted by chemical greed, no one has ever died from an overdose of pornography.
On my IMDb, I have about 300 films that I've acted in and 165 that I've directed.
I filmed over 380 scenes by the time I was 25 years old. I had a website, and on my website it says, "You must be 18 years old or older to enter." But anybody could click enter. A 10-year-old could click enter.
The system is broken and something needs to change.
We are the perfect whipping boy for all of society's ills. But we're simply just an entertainment factor, and if you don't want it, turn it off.
It's a completely unnecessary product, but everybody needs it.
Great business plan, devastatingly awful for the culture.
Thank God for horny guys.
My name is Joseph, and I'm 13 years old, and I am a recovered porn addict.
All right. So I realized that we're at time. I just have a few more slides and then we can go to question. So the myths of pornography. Mainstream porn is like Playboy. You just heard about that in the video. It is not at all like Playboy, Penthouse, or Hustler from the days gone back. Myth number 2, my child doesn't watch porn. Definitely not true. Myth number 3, that pornography is educational and it serves as a sex educational tool. We had this come up several years ago with the previous bill that the senator brought forward, that one of the expert witnesses was someone who did research on, I think it was something completely not even related to pornography and sexual education, and came out saying that pornography is a sex education tool. And depending on where you go, you will find that, but it really is harmful. Myth number 4, that porn is just fantasy. Porn is real life actors. Porn is individuals who are engaged in sexual acts that may have tears streaming down their face, and they're supposed to look like they're enjoying this and that it's entertaining. It's very dangerous. The consequences, again, are multidimensional. They include sexual addiction, physical and neurology issues. They increase mental health and addiction issues. And believe it or not, people actually do die from this as a compulsive sexual behavior disorder. I know several people that have died. It has gotten me into the research of this whole space, were exactly people dying from compulsive sexual behavior disorders. There are definitely people out there that do not believe that that exists, but the World Health Organization in 2022 in the ICD-11 put forward compulsive sexual behavior disorder as a compulsive behavior disorder, along with gambling and eating disorders. So it is real. It is recognized by the World Health Organization. Because it's not recognized in the DSM-5 TR, which is the latest version that all clinicians use, medical psychiatrists, doctors, people like myself use for diagnostic and statistical reasons. It is not mentioned in there, but it will be mentioned in there, because when the World Health Organization comes forward and they have the research, it's only time before the rest of us in North America follow suit. Yeah. So this is interesting because the World Health Organization again said that sexual internet-based preoccupations are one of the 4 core concerns of digital technology that we're facing now. This is a Globe and Mail article that came out on the weekend, and as you can see, Canada is accused of being out of step over moves to stop kids viewing online pornography. You'll notice the graphic on the side is from hear no evil, see no evil, have no fun. And how horrifying that is when it comes to children accessing pornography online. Just some revisiting here of what Penny discussed. We ask you to advocate for change, to stop being naive about the impact that pornography has in children's lives. We now have hundreds of research documents to show that it absolutely does cause harm. We want you to advocate for Bill S-210 with all that you know, that is currently in the House of Commons for study. And this is the website that the senator has up to talk about information that is related to that. And if you have any questions of me, feel free to email me at jocelyn@jocelynmonsma.com. And thank you again for having me. And I hope that this evening for all of you has been informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. This was really, I won't say wonderful, it was shocking. I never expected those statistics. And I think it's all the more important for our Muslim community, who tends to just shove the issue of sexuality under the carpet. We also have a very young community, so it's more than important to address these problems. And I see that we have some questions. So, Iman, would you like to lead us through them, please? We have 5 minutes or for questions.
I don't see any questions right now.
It's everybody's thanking our panelists. This was really marvelous. So we don't have questions, but I would encourage you to write to Dr. Jocelyn if you want to contact her directly. And also, we're going to follow up with Penny and the letter that we should be signing to ask for for the law, actually the bill to pass in the House of Commons.
Sama, can I just make one point?
For sure.
It's really important tonight that everybody here understand that governments are responsible for regulation.
Yeah.
Never in history has an industry self-regulated when it has been touted to have caused harm. Look at the tobacco industry, look at all drugs. Alcohol, rental cars is another one. You can't get a rental car unless you're 25 years of age. You know, so I think if you look at the tobacco industry, if you look at purchasing alcohol or marijuana or any of those issues that are now legal in Canada, it has been governments who have done the regulation to protect children from accessing them. This is no different. Anyway.
Yeah. Another point that I like to make when people have difficulties with the idea of age verification, just imagine you are a 22-year-old who happens to look about 16 and you want to go and buy cigarettes or...
And in this organization...
Oh, hello. I think we're getting somebody coming in. Anyway, and you're 22, but you look 16. Well, the salesperson is going to ask you to prove your age. And what are you going to do? You're going to pull out your driver's license or some other identity. The age verification measures will not in any way be as public as what would happen in that situation. So we need to have more conversations, but we definitely need to work really hard to get this bill through. and not think it's just going to go through because, of course, we take care of our children. That's part of the reason why I brought in the information about, generally speaking, how Canada is not doing as well as we would think, because we make assumptions and we cannot dare make an assumption that this is all going to go away. It's not going to go away. We need to have this legislation.
And I would add that we should not only trust the government to push for the legislation, we should act ourselves. So what you're doing, Penny, and also Jocelyn, is so immensely appreciated because it's the power of the people finally who bring on change, not the government and not even the UN, as you mentioned, Penny.
Summer, we have 2 questions now. Do we have time to go over them?
All right, we can take another 5 minutes. One of them I see, is there a relationship between this topic and the LGBTQ topic? Who would like to answer this?
Okay, so there, there is definitely, if you go to the menu items in pornography, there is definitely LGBTQ menu items for individuals. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the question, but I'm not sure that pornography stimulates LGBTQ individuals. It might stimulate some to be confused about their sexuality, to question it if they're watching pornography that is LGBTQ related. That can happen. People can question if they are gay, straight, bi, are they transgendered? Yes, if they're watching pornography that is in those genres, it can cause confusion and it can stimulate them to ask questions. Hopefully that's a little helpful. Does pornography impact the way you see people in general? Is it in a much more sexualized way? It can be, because if you are expecting the women that you're with to act like the women in the pornography that you've been watching, they are going to be sexualized. And we have a huge battle, and the feminist movement was created to support women to be recognized as human beings and not sex objects. And what pornography does is it recognizes women in part as sexual objects. So
modifies them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, at CCF, we are aiming at empowering women. So this is why this webinar is so important for us.
I have a quick question, Sama, if I may.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Farida, please.
I think it's for Penny, because if the bill passes and it's really to monitor the ages of people who go on these pornographic sites, is that really enough? Because first of all, a person can lie about his or her age. The next thing is that should we be asking the CRTC to prevent, to ban all free pornographic sites, meaning that whoever wants to indulge should have to pay for it, rather than have free access, free sites. Can't the CRT, I don't know, who's the governing body here? Is it the CRTC that governs what we see?
The CRTC comes under the mandate of the Minister of Heritage, which is why I mentioned that we've had the 4 different ministers in the last, since 2015 anyway. I don't think there's any hope that the industry could be set up in such a way that it was only pay per view kind of thing. That I don't see as happening at all. And I don't see how they would go about legislating it. But your question in terms of, is this enough? Probably not. I mean, I think that that's something that we're aware of. If that people know how to get around roadblocks, as it were. But it is a huge step, and it will make a very big difference. And it is not, I want to really re-emphasize this, it's not about age verification, does not does not have to do with identity verification. There are many different approaches. I mean, here's a kind of a simple one. It's not linked to any kind of computer really. But for example, in Germany, if you want to buy a cell phone, the cell phone comes locked. It comes locked in terms of accessing what are considered, so the phone itself has a lock system in it, worked into this. I don't understand the technology particularly, but so that you can't buy alcohol or cigarettes or order them or things like that, or go online for porn on that phone without proving that you are an adult. And so that when you're at that purchasing point, when you're using your credit card, etc., it is clear that you are an adult. Now, of course, an adult could buy this and give it to a child, and there may be other incidents like that. So nothing is going to be a complete solution, but that should never, ever, ever be a reason not to try and take these first steps. We will get better at it. I'm convinced that we will get better at it.
I think, Penny, it was mentioned at the seminar you gave at Concordia that technology is evolving and is a step ahead of the industry. But we have to keep fighting, we have to keep progressing, because they are making inroads also.
Most definitely. That's very true.
Point, I'd like to thank the panelists and all participants. I would like also to thank Heritage Canada for giving us the fund to Muslim Awareness Week that allows us to have those activities and those events. And I would strongly suggest that you visit the website of the Muslim Awareness Week and also of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. Finally, my very special thanks go to the administrative team of CCMW National based in Toronto, and we have our president of the National, Nina Karachi Khalid, with us. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Une excellente soirée à vous tous et au revoir. Merci.
Thank you.